And so the reason is, back to the original point, I want people to understand I'm an expert in cloud computing. So I put this blog post on my personal blog, and I have other posts where it's actually me writing about cloud computing. So I put that on my personal blog, and then I also publish that on an IBM-owned blog.
In Klingon?
Right. And so that is the stuff that they generally point people to.
Right.
But yet I still want to take credit for my own work, so that if I do leave IBM, I have a history of 5 years of writing about cloud computing that I don't lose.
That was the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a right answer there. Our guidelines don't address that.
Yeah.
But I've seen where somebody was the most popular blogger around a certain subject in our company. They left, and there was a legal dispute literally over the name of their blog because it was so popular that
Right.
IBM wanted to retain it and just assign it to whoever the next market manager was.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I've invested 5 years of my life into this brand.
Right.
I'm taking it with me.
While you were working for us.
She won the fight.
She won?
Well, there was no legal precedent.
Right.
So there was nothing, and there was nothing in our guidelines.
Right.
So she won that fight. I'm exaggerating. It wasn't really a fight. I mean, but it becomes more of a fight now that social media is 10 years old.
Yeah, well,
It's a bigger deal because this is my digital life for the last 15 years almost, right? So from a company perspective, if I leave IBM, I still am IBM in a way.
You can also think about our church, and a lot of churches now
Yes.
are coming up with guidelines, especially in services.
Yep.
And explicitly to start either saying, I know one minister who says, as long as it's not intrusive, no flashes or whatever you do with your digital devices is fine. The bulk of the ministers, though, are the other way, which is, please turn off your digital devices that may squawk, squeak, or make any noises during the service. But having it upfront, explicit, and even written into the bulletin is increasingly popular now. I think our conferences ought to decide. Well, actually, this conference, last year, we explicitly said, yeah, go ahead, retrieve this stuff to whatever. I mean, we wanted that.
right.
But getting back to the core of your question, there are two parts of the issue. The first is, when you hire someone to develop an audience, it is with the understanding that that audience will be retained by the company. That's the original theory. The challenge then becomes if that person goes to a competitor, more so, or to another company. So it's the same thing as hiring an endorser,
Right.
and according to a lot of courts. The second part of that is if you hire someone with a major audience before they come to the company, this is now being negotiated. Wayne Sutton, who, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Wayne's work, but he was hired by an agency over in Raleigh to be their social media coordinator. He's one of the first 100 users of Twitter. He's got an enormous following. But part of the negotiation was, my following rolls with me when I leave. He was only with the agency for about a year. He's now out in California. He's co-founder of an incubator and some other stuff.
He's at Essence right now.
Yeah, but this is exactly the conversation that Wayne had to have before he went to the agency and subsequently when he left.
Yep. I think Wayne's a good example. I think I'm a good example from a corporate perspective. I think Wayne's a good example from a consultant perspective. He and I are very different. I'm just to let you. I was one of his closest friends before he moved to the West Coast. All of the events that he and I organized together, like Triangle Tweet Up, Ignite. A lot of those events were me and him and Kip Bodnar and Jeffrey Cohen. And we literally, I met Wayne at a blogger conference, the Converge South conference in Greensboro, when the year that Twitter came out. And we were literally sitting there eating lunch. He's like, I'm from Raleigh. And he's like, oh, did you hear about Twitter? No, what's that? And we literally, that's how Triangle Tweet Up started. We came back that December, went to a coffee shop, and Jenny Skalski from NBC 17, met us. That's when he worked for NBC 17 to build their social media presence. The whole My NC, if you remember that, that was his brainchild. And Jenny, they built that together before they destroyed it with ads, and they had to leave. And then, anyhow, but Wayne is a serial entrepreneur, so his personal brand is his livelihood. So socialwayne.com is, it's him, it's everything he does, whether it's incubators, what he does with press, whatever the theme of the month is. He does a Blacks in Tech every February, where he focuses on entrepreneurship. He was featured in CNN, for doing the incubator work on the West Coast. So he's done a lot of things like that. Whereas my identity is more about thought leadership in technology areas, but equally important to your point. I think if, as a company, getting away from the conferences for a minute, as a company, you really do need to look at those 2 points right off the bat. If you're hiring somebody like me or Wayne. Because the primary example I can think of is Robert Scoble. He started at Microsoft as chief blogger in chief. He called himself, and he became this behemoth that became bigger than Microsoft. So he was exactly like an endorsed celebrity, right? And his whole thing is he puts a video camera on his shoulder, puts a light on the other, and he goes around and just talks to people. That's all he does, right? That's his shtick, and he's famous for it. So anyhow, so I think with a company you have to look at that question and say, before you hire a person for a job like that, are they only going to be the faceless voice? Meaning, we call them in IBM, we call them branded social profiles. So you can go on Twitter today, there's thousands of IBM accounts, right? There's not one for the company. There's a Twitter account for Watson. There's a Twitter account for mobile. There's a Twitter account for mobile support. There's layers of the onion, right? And all these teams, we're all digital now. Like every team at IBM has been mandated, you must have a social presence to service our customer needs. So whether you're in support, whether you're in marketing, whether you're an architect who goes to a conference and speaks, you all need that digital presence.
So do you think the same rules apply for nonprofits as far as having communication folks on staff?
I think you have to look at it as, I always say, for social media, everyone says, should I be on Pinterest, should I be on Twitter? The answer is yes. I mean, the answer is not that you should jump on everything, it's what is your business goal, right? I'll be the first to tell you, don't get on Twitter if you're not going to use it and you're not going to get something out of it. You'd be better off not being there. So as a nonprofit or as a company, you have to say to yourself, do I want to establish NCTech4Good as your identity? Or do you want to establish that Paula Jones is the talking head of NCTech4Good? So you have to answer that question first and say, how closely do you align your personal life with your private?
Well, the answer may be...
professional.
But the answer may be yes.
The answer may be yes for a period of time.
Yeah, and then the question is, okay, how to have both. So you maintain your personal ID in whichever one of the platforms or many of the platforms. Then the question is how to aggregate that, where to aggregate that, that has the identity of the conference or the organization.
Yep. I think what many people do, like Beth, like Robert Scoble, like Wayne here, they're the net